morning, well, I guess this afternoon now, I'm going to start with a little story that I came across, and it says a man and his wife, and he's been a businessman for all of his life, and he's nearing kind of the end of his life, and he says to his wife, I want you to promise me that when I die, all this money that I've earned, you're going to bury it in my casket with me. And being the good wife that she is, she says, okay, you know, I promise that I will bury your fortune with you. So the time comes around, and he dies, and so towards the end, when the casket, just before it goes into the ground, she gets up and she has this box, like shoe box, and goes and puts it in the casket, and her friend says, surely you did not put all of his money in the casket with him. And she said, well, of course, I'm a good Christian, I can't lie. I told him that I would do that, so I transferred all the money to my account, and I wrote him a check, and I put it in his casket. So he was buried with all of his fortune with a check, of course. So we all know it's ridiculous to say that what we have on earth that we can take with us when we go. And so like that story, it's kind of silly that we kind of have this mindset, though, I think, that the more stuff we acquire, that's somehow going to make us be more successful. And I think that Jesus had a lot to say about wealth and about possessions. And so like smack dab in the middle of the Sermon on the Mount, he goes into this talking about money and talking about the things that you have. And there's just one verse that really stands out to me that I think is so powerful. And it's really simple. It says, Matthew 6:21, it says, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And so I want to point out to you that it doesn't say where your heart is, there your treasure will be. It says where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. I think that our heart follows our treasure, and I think that's what Jesus was teaching. When just before that, he's saying that you know, don't seek after earthly possessions that are going to rot, but seek after heavenly possessions that you will have for eternity. And so in a culture that is so wealth and possession driven, we have to have the latest iPhone, we have to have all of our styles, and how can we stand out? And I think that around us, if we're being honest, if I'm being honest, I don't really want to give up those things, and I don't really always want to put my money or my possessions towards other things when I can use them for selfish things. But I think what Jesus is teaching is that we do that in faith. We put our money, we put our possessions, what we have, toward things of the kingdom, and then our heart will follow after. It's not that I just wait and I pray and I say, Lord, will you please make me willing to give my money, and when I feel like it, then I will. We do it, and then our heart changes, because by His grace He changes us, and our heart goes after the things of Him. So if you have an iPhone, I do. If you know the founders, you know Steve Jobs, and there were two Steves, but there was actually a third guy that was in on the deal for the first 12 days, and his name was Ronald Wayne. And after 12 days, he had a lot invested in the company. He got a little nervous, so he sold his 10% of Apple for $800. And so if he just waited a little bit longer, that $800 is now 10% of Apple would be $80 billion. And so if he had just waited a little bit longer, but he traded out for the immediate reward. And what I would challenge you today is, don't trade out for the immediate rewards. That there's stuff that there are things that we can gather right now, but they're not worth trading out for what is to come. And so how do we store up treasures in heaven? And I think it's simply, first, like I said, we put our money and we put our possessions, we put our talents and we put our time towards things of heaven. And so maybe that looks like loving your enemies and loving the people that are really hard to love. So you say, how do I love them? Well, even when you don't feel like loving them, you serve them. Even when you admit that you're wrong, you listen to them and show that you care, even when you don't feel like it. Because I don't think that sometimes the things that the Lord calls us to do, we feel like doing. But at the end of the day, I think that we, with our wealth, will either worship our wealth or we will worship with our wealth. And so I would challenge you today to worship with your wealth and not your wealth.
That's great. All right, awesome.